Hey everybody, it's Ben again, and it's like 4 in the morning right now. So today we're going to be reviewing a great book called A Naked Singularity by Sergio de la Pava. Now, I picked up this book in 2018 when I went to the International Book Fair in Oakland. I went to a bookstore because I was expecting to buy a book at the book fair, and the cheapest one I saw was like $500. So I went to his local bookstore, and this just kind of caught the corner of my eye, and I figured like, oh, what the hell? I really should go outside my comfort zone and read something. So I just decided to pick it up. Now I'm really happy I did, because this is a great example of maximalist and more importantly postmodernist literature. Now I have been reading it off and on since 2018. The reason for that is not so much because the book was bad, it's just that sometimes it wouldn't hold my interest exactly. And then after that, I would pick it up, really get into it, and I just finally finished it now. But it's a huge tank of a book, and I think what kind of contributed to me not reading it was like that year or the year before, I read like 800-page books, so kind of killed my incentive to read another big honker like this one. Now, funny enough, there is going to be a movie adaptation. I just found that out. It's in the works, with that dude Finn from Star Wars. I forgot his name, but let me go over the plot of the book first. So this book is about an attorney in New York, set in the early 2000s, and he is a very smart young man. He's around like 23 years old. His name is Cassie. You can kind of tell he's a stand-in for the author, who the author himself was an attorney, and this was his first work. So it's just him going through a lot of trial work, and he loses his first case, and things kind of unravel from there. And he gets he gets a client that has information on a drug heist, like with some money and everything. And he has a client with some information on a drug exchange where there'll be a lot of money, and he lied to the investigators where it will take place. So Cassie gets the idea with another attorney, Dane, to intercept the money from that heist and kind of retire and just like leave the country. Now that's where the novel leaves off, and like much like a lot of pension books, that's just the framework, and it just leaves us open for a lot of side stories and just like descending into different narrative paths and whatnot. And so he'll cover ranges from the honeymooners to boxing to again the legal system, how he deals with his clients, his family, his weird ass roommates, and just kind of just circulates from there. Now the nice thing about this book, if sometimes the open narrative from like pension books can be a bit too unsatisfying. They were for me at first, until I grew accustomed to them. But this one does have a pretty decent resolution, and the slight spoilers, but they do get around to it. So if you're just kind of feeling like, oh, I don't want to be in a book for it's just going to be so open and we never get to the climax, don't worry, it does come up in this book. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of a discussion reviewing Sen. Well, I'm going to compare this to another book. This book reminds me a lot of actually of Infinite Jest. If you don't know, David Foster Wallace's magnum opus, a huge tenement of the postmodern literature. It's usually compared up there with Ulysses and Gravity's Rainbow. However, I just couldn't put it up there with In Good Faith. I don't think it's that difficult, and also I don't think it's that interesting. Now, even though I'm comparing it to Infinite Jest, and I didn't say too much great things about it, this book I feel should probably take the place of Infinite Jest. Now, you can tell there was influence from Infinite Jest in this book, a lot with the wacky characters, the hard dissertations into like academia and athletics. However, I found this book a lot more varied with the topics and a lot more enjoyable. Outside of the college environment and the move and the film, you don't really get too much, I feel like, out of that book. With this one, when he even goes to like the dissertations about boxing and about all the different boxers, it's actually really interesting. I found myself getting more engaged with it than I did the tennis scenes in Infinite Jest. And let's go to a key factor before I get to a little bit more comparing. With it, let's go with the characterization. Now, a lot like a lot of postmodern works, there's some wacky ass characters in here. He has a roommate who's trying to like become one of the Honeymooners TV show by watching it constantly. There's a man they have arms the size of hydrants. Fun fact: I wrote a short story once where I referenced the Honeymooners, but I didn't watch the whole series because it was only a short story. I didn't have the time for that, so I only watched the first few episodes and I referenced that. Now, when he referenced the Honeymooners in this book, I can tell he was referencing the exact same episode, so I think the author only saw like the first couple of episodes as well, or maybe just refreshed his mind on it. So it's kind of funny I referenced the same Honeymooners shows as he did in this book, but his book is obviously better than my writing. Now, there is an interesting middle ground between the eccentric and the normal characters, and that is with his clients. His clients are very okay. If you worked in a law office or any sort of legal profession, you realize how accurate this is actually as to clients. Even though these people are goofy, the drug dealers, one person is mentally disabled, they can't respond to letters, they can't follow tax properly. He explains himself over and over again, and they don't seem to get it. Now, both my parents are lawyers, and I grew up with seeing my mom go through law school, and I worked at my dad's law office after college. And I have to say, if you think these are too off the wall to be real, they're actually pretty realistic. The clients are actually like this, where you just have to explain things over and over and over again. Now, the thing I like about his depiction of clients also, despite that really goofy aspect, is that unlike in Infinite Jest, it doesn't feel like he's punching down. In Infinite Jest, there's a scene where some druggies and a transvestite person injects like bleach, and they start bleeding out their eyes and everything. And I remember reading that scene and just kind of feeling like, it was kind of mean spirited. And I find with Dark works, but it just kind of felt like there was no other point to showing that scene other than like, haha, look at these people. And it doesn't help that the fact that he changed the language to Ebonics in that part also, when the rest of the novel really isn't, except for in those scenes. But the thing that really offsets it with this book, Naked Singularity, where it doesn't feel like punching down, is that Cassie has a real concern for his clients. You can tell, despite how much they frustrate him, how much they just aggravate him, how much he just feels like help me, help you, he cares about his clients. He goes out of his way even other attorneys comment on him, well, it's like, why are you putting so much effort? You're so meticulous about this. And you really feel later in the novel, it doesn't come from a place of, I have to win this case. It comes from a place that it's like, no, I want this person. If I don't want this person to be on the death penalty. A great example of that is, again, a mentally ill client where he keeps constant contact through, and the client even asks him like, hey, I'm in solitary confinement. The only time I actually talk to somebody is when the guard gives me letters and he jokes to me, and the client's mentally disabled. So what Cassie does is that he sends 10 copies of the same letter. That way they can just keep giving it to him so he can have that constant stream of contact. It's a great middle ground in showing how eccentric and wacky and like frustrating and stupid some people can be without just being like a a-hole just punching down on them again. Now, another thing with the law aspect of this book is that comes up to the characters, Cassie's thinking, a lot of other characters like Dane as well, their thought process. It's kind of an attorney mindset where they like to argue the morals of the situation, how one should view the situation. A great example of that is when Cassie is talking about Hume, where he's talking about the relationship between cause and effect, and Hume talks about how because we can perceive something, we can assume that result is going to happen over and over again. And Cassie posits that, like, but that's exactly because we can see something, we could also imagine a situation where it doesn't happen, loosening the effect of cause and effect. And, then he puts it directly with his car not starting, something that happens over and over again, and it doesn't work when it needs to. Now, that kind of goes into a very great postmodern ideology again with Thomas Pynchon, where he talks about the V2 rockets, where they hit their target before the sound even arrives. And with that mindset, it's saying cause and effect is a very loose relationship. It's not as one-to-one as we thought it was. I'm not saying that effects become before the cause necessarily, but just that equal and opposite reaction part of it doesn't really apply, and how much of that is actually just human ideology and human thought process and perspective that determines that relationship, not so much an essential idea that's permanent throughout the universe. Postmodernists don't like, even like philosophers like Foucault don't like to go to universals, because even if there is a universal, hypothetically, that can be misconstrued and changed depending on the ID perspective of the person. A great example of that is look at all the different translations of the Bible and all the different interpretations of the Judeo-Christian God, just based off the Old Testament, the New Testament, Christianity, Catholicism, Protestant, Orthodox Jew. They're just, even though it's supposed to be the universal in the law, there's a different interpretation for each one. And that's what this book gets at it. But the funny thing about this book, you'd also expect it to get more at a systematic view. You expect to have a more postmodern viewpoint of this systematic view, like the systems that control our world, being that they're in the legal profession. But it actually comes down more to like moral views. In a lot of these novels, you'd expect it to say how ridiculous the system is, and it really does. But I feel like there's a lot more emphasis on how ridiculous morals are, how malleable what can be considered goodness, what can be considered right, what can even be considered cause and effect in terms of meritocracy. What I mean by that is Cassie is a person who went to law school. He's very educated. He's doing as best as he can for the clients and winning these cases. However, it's not really getting him where exactly where he wants to be at life. And one could say, like, yeah, he's a 23-year-old trial attorney. It's always going to be tough at that time. But, when you're that age, and even me right now, I still experience that to a degree, is that you just kind of feel like, it's like, how are other people making it? How are other people doing fine when you follow the systems, you did every right step, and you're still struggling out there? And I think a lot of millennials can feel that as well, where, we are the most educated generation, but we are still, and we're actually getting paid more than our previous counterparts, the generation after baby boomers and even the baby boomers, but we're still the generation who's taking the longest to get out of the parents' house, who's struggling the most. And that's just to effect of the cost of living going up, degrees not being as strong as they were, and just jobs not being as available. So even though this book was written published in the early 2000s, like 2008 or so, a lot of this concepts still apply to now in that sense, where it's just like, hey, this was this value system that you set up for me, but now it's not going to affect. And so that's where the postmodern ideology comes in, where it's like, why do I even value this value system? And who is this value system for, and who created it exactly? Because for Cassie, he's not going anywhere in the world. And no matter what he tries to do with his clients, other alternative factors are out there preventing him from doing the best he can for them. For example, either telling him misinformation or something illegal, which gets him, well, I don't want to spoil too much, but gets him in trouble later on, whether it be with the mentally ill client again, where he's waiting on a decision from the Supreme Court, whether it's going to be, they're going to allow to execute mentally disabled people. And whether, even the question of, did these clients commit these crimes, or do they deserve the punishment that they have? This was much like you saw with the drug crisis, where people would get extended sentences for just holding marijuana, and now there's a law from the Obama administration where you don't have that extended stay in prison if you're holding marijuana possession. And again, it just goes more rather than the systems, and it does apply, but it goes more to what is the morals of American society? What is the morals of the present day? What is the morals of somebody trying to navigate through this world? And I guess much like the Marquis de Sade, it's saying also, well, if goodness is not doing us proper, or even like Faust, which Books Better Than Food cited a great line from that. It's like, what has patience got me? So both the ideologies, if goodness hasn't got me this, if patience hasn't got me this, why do we hold these value systems? Why not go to crime? Especially when you see a larger payoff, because they have a payoff of $22 million. That's more than he could ever earn in his lifetime as an attorney, only for a small act going against criminals. But also, slight spoilers in the book, you see Cassie's own internal value system and his own internal empathy and his own moral code starting to shine through and even question himself. So I think that's a aspect people forget about postmodernism a lot, is that even though you can view value systems from a myriad of different points and myriad of different upbringings and culture, we still live within a culture, and within our culture, it's predominantly a Western Christian ideology culture where murder is wrong. Well, it's like that in other cultures too, but murder is wrong, and Cassie, that comes up for Cassie later on in the novel. So even when he is in the act of the heist, he can't commit himself to killing. He can't commit himself to be the villain due to his own value system. Now let's talk about the boxing segments a little bit in the book. I feel like this people who are get more into sports will get a lot more out of it than I am. I'm not a sports person, but I do like fighting manga, so I did like the boxing section to that point. But it kind of reflects Cassie in a way, and it just kind of reflects again the ridiculousness of the value system. Much like Maximal books like to do, they like to approach subjects from as many different points of view as they possibly can, and it talks about all these different great fighters who are all at the top of their game, who had struggles but would always rise back up even if they lost a few rounds and always have a comeback. Oh, a great example of that is Benitez, where he is a Mexican fighter who just like dominates. He's just one of those genetic freaks, naturally gifted, can do anything you want, to the point where he is not even training except for some bouts, and he still, even though he's struggling, he still beats the opponent. And this is going to get into spoilers. The boxing segments aren't too pertinent to the plot, so it's not spoiling too much. However, all these great fighters, they all come and they have rematches. They fight against each other, and they have these they have all these title belts when they retire. But then they're I think it's called CEP, where they have the mental condition where they took so many blows they can't function anymore. They retire in obscurity. Benitez is being taken care of by his mom, like at the beginning of his career, because he can't even function in a wheelchair by himself. Much like another book I read called Composers of Tomorrow, where it's about a bunch of avant-garde 20th century musicians, and there was like 3 chapters in a row when like, and he had no money, and they worked at a college at the end of their life to pay for their kids. This is like the same thing with the boxers. These people who achieved greatness, who was the best in their craft, and then just going poor into obscurity. And you even see that with real life figures like James Joyce as well. Composer models was real life figures, but I think that's just another aspect to go to the value system, the value of why put this much effort into the craft if you just kind of end up worse than where you were beforehand. That happened with Protest the Hero, which I did a review on the lyrics, where I remember in the making of Volition, when they were 28, they said if they didn't do a GoFundMe, they wouldn't be able to be a band anymore, because they were making the same amount of money they were at 28 as they were at 18. And that comes into question a lot with the common man also. What is the value of working this consistent jobs, of having that 40-hour week schedule, if, especially in this economy, if we're not going to have anything to pass on to the youth, if we're not going to have to our next of kin, if we're not going to be able to pay off our house and even consolidate all our debts. So a lot of this novel, I probably would say, is from the perspective of a young man who just looking at the future of his life and being like, what the hell am I doing? Why am I here? And then, you couple that with his friends who are just kind of like, kind of beatnikish, not really doing much. There's one guy who's a genius in psychology, and he goes into physics. He's the guy who's trying to conjure the honeymooners world. And even like love interest, and those 3 characters, they'll go to Mexico for spring break, and just enjoying themselves. And somebody who is in the working world, who's doing their best, and you do see that where it's like, man, I'm working my ass off, and these people are having more fun than me. How can they afford that lifestyle when it's like I can barely afford an apartment? And it's just that feeling again of the values. I'm like, am I doing the right thing? Am I going towards the right direction with this? Now, again, those are just some of the main themes I kind of saw in the novel. There's so much to this novel. It's so dense. If you look at the page count, which I love doing, you can see, random page, pretty hefty. So there is some stuff I'm skipping. There is some stuff that you will get out of this novel that I won't. But, at the same time, that's always the case with maximalist novels. There was just so much packed into it. A true summary of every single plot point. Maybe only the author can truly do that in some cases, or somebody who's read it a multitude of times and studied it and really gone through and really read what other people had to say about the book. I read this once, but now another aspect I want to get at in this book, and that's the ending. So this is going to be the spoiler part of my discussion. And the ending does is very strange. It reminds me a lot of actually the end of Against the Day, where some kind of mathematical concept comes in, or space-time warp comes in and interrupts the flow of the narrative. Now I can be totally off about this. So, but at the end of the book, he comes across a guy who wants to kill him from the heist, and one of his roommates previously talks about a naked singularity. It's the first time in the book. It's in the last 50 pages or even 25 pages of the book. And he talks about a naked singularity, about how the concept of the universe constantly expanding, and how eventually it'll come back in and condense on itself. Much like a black hole where nothing can escape, it's a singularity that, with a black hole, we can't see it because no light escapes, but this condensed singularity is something that we can see because the light is there. That's why it's naked, it's visible. And at the end of the book, he's confronting the whale, the guy with the huge forearms, Dopo Orochi arms, and you know, when he's about to approach him, pretty much accepting his death, he has the money in the locker ready to go. Dane gave it all to him, and he was fired from the law office, and it's almost accumulation of all these events. Everything that just seemed out there are finally kind of came together for the character, and then that singularity comes in where everything, time, space, people, all condense into one, and that's how the novel ends. And my thought process of it is that I think if I had to take a guess at this, it's a metatextual analysis on narrative. The sense that, again, like I mentioned a few minutes earlier, all the plot points in the novel finally do get resolved in this one. It's not necessarily an open novel until this point. It seems like it's going to be an open novel, but the plot point of the heist gets resolved. The plot point of his niece being able to talk, him getting fired from his law office, all of his clients. He actually goes to see the hearings of all his clients, seeing what their fates are. And you know, even with the last hair standing out with the whale, he finally accepted it to resolve this situation and to confront him directly. So I guess much like the arc of a novel, it starts off like they kind of said the universe is kind of like, you know, one single thing. But then it blows up and expands into all these different narrative plot points, only to come together again, back into a satisfying finish, a singularity, if you will. And I think that's what he's getting at. And if I'm going to be a little bit more hippie-ish, I guess, about it, if you think about the nature of a book, you open it and it expands, but what happens when you get to the end of the book? You close it again. I'm pretty sure that's not what the author's intent was whatsoever, but it was just a funny thing I thought of. So with this book, would I recommend it? I would, and personally, I would replace it in the canons with Infinite Jest. Even though you can tell this got a lot of influence from Infinite Jest, I feel this is just a much better attempt at what David Foster Wallace was getting at. It's more entertaining, it's more diverse, it's a lot more philosophical, it's a lot funnier actually. The characters are very goofy without having to feel like punching down. And he does a great job of talking about the different classes of society, from the rich attorneys all the way to the poorest crack addicts out there. And it all just flows a lot better, I feel like. So I would definitely give this novel check this novel out. There's really not a lot about it, which is unfortunate because he's a great author. I probably will check out his next two books as well. But just a fair bit of warning, you can tell this man loves to write because, again, he'll go on page-long dissertations, just conversations between two people, and you know, these pages are not small. But also, the nice thing about this novel is that if you're just trying to get into more maximalist work and more postmodernist and you just want to tackle a big book, the writing style isn't really that difficult for it. It's pretty tame. It's not too flowery or anything. There is long dissertations, but it's pretty consumable. So I would definitely recommend it. That's again A Naked Singularity by Sergio de la Pava, and I gotta fix my sleep schedule again, so later. My biggest regret is that I didn't show my naked singularity for the thumbnail.